around the world. This is ABC 2000. Once again from Times Square in New York, Peter Jennings.
Everywhere we've been today, but particularly in the Pacific, we can't help but notice that people have celebrated their indigenous people. You recall very early in the day the power of celebration with the Maori people in New Zealand and the Aboriginal people in Australia. It is certainly true here in the United States tonight. We're now going to take you to Tucson, Arizona, where ABC's Barry Serafin is attending. Listen to this. The New Millennium First Peoples World Fair and Powwow, or, Barry, I gather, Thunder in the Desert.
That's right, Peter, and there's some thunder going on right now, as you can hear, some drumming. It's been going on through the day. We are indeed celebrating this New Year's with Americans whose ancestors were here for the last millennium, and for thousands of years before that, Native Americans. This powwow is a social and a spiritual event. There are representatives of more than 100 tribes from around the country, as well as representatives of Native peoples from some other countries. We have Bolivians who are arriving. We had Aztec dancers this afternoon. And so it's really quite an event in a 9-acre park here in Tucson. I'd like to, Peter, if I can, ask a couple of questions of two special people who are here. One is Floyd Red Crow Westerman. He's a musician and an actor, and you probably remember him from Dancing with Wolves, among other things. What does this event mean to you?
Barry, we have many Indian nations represented tonight to be part of the grand total of the celebration throughout the world on our new millennium. We're happy to show the many Indian nations, and also, as you see behind you, the many flags we are honoring in this circle, which means we are all part of the circle of life. We are still carrying on our traditions in spite of what has happened in the past, and it was a Holocaust that happened to us, and we still keep our ways, and we're still strong.
And this is Carol Garcia, who is one of the organizers of this event, and it really is meant to showcase that your culture and your traditions are still alive, isn't it? And it's also very much for the children.
That's right. We did this for our children so that we can inspire them as they can enter into the 21st century, that our culture is strong and it has persevered, and that it will continue into the next 21st century.
Thank you both very much. That's really what it's about, Peter. It's, and as some people have said to me, it's really a chance to say we're still here. We're survivors.
Barry, let me ask you a personal question, because you grew up in Oregon, on the Oregon coast, where there are a goodly number of Native American tribes. Repeat for our audience what you told me the other day about how much you'd seen the land change.
Well, I did see changes, Peter. One of my distinct memories as a youngster there was watching a group called the Salilo tribe up on the Columbia River spear salmon in a dramatic big waterfall. And then later on, a dam came in, one of the many dams on the Columbia River. The waterfalls disappeared, the salmon disappeared, the Salilo Indians disappeared. So there were a lot of changes visible just in my lifetime.
And remind me again just how many tribes there are in the United States, or at least how many the federal government recognizes?
The federal government nowadays, Peter, recognizes 557 tribes, and surprisingly, nearly half of them, 226 of them, are in Alaska. There are 2.3 million tribal members in the United States. That's just under 1% of the U.S. population.
And I wonder, as we go into the 21st century, listening to what Carol Garcia said about educating the Native American children, how hard it is in the face of everything that's available to them through technology to hang on to their family and tribal ways.
I've talked to people here about that, Peter, and they all say, yes, it is a problem. They have the same diversions that all young people do. Computers, video games, music. On the other hand, I think there is a growing awareness now among young people, and there are more and more courses being offered to them in their culture, their language, their traditions. The proceeds from this event go to a scholarship program, part of which is to teach young Native Americans about their traditions and their culture.
And while, as you've pointed out, they've been here for more than this or more than several millennia, how are they going to celebrate when it comes to being midnight in Tucson?
Well, it's going to look a little like what you're seeing now, Peter, only much bigger. Come midnight here, it's going to be a big traditional round dance. And that means everybody's invited in, native and non-native Americans. The general public is very much invited here. And you'll see everyone will form a big dance around this circle. And my guess is that it'll snake out all around the camp. There are some teepees set up, 9 acres worth, so it'll be a dance that will go right on into the early morning hours.
So we look forward to joining you when it happens. Barry Serafon in Tucson, Arizona for Thunder in the Desert. And from Tucson, Arizona, try to cross the T's. We're going to go from Tucson to the Tropicana. We're going to go back for our second visit today to Havana in Cuba and Cynthia McFadden. Boy, does that look different behind you.
Buenas noches, Peter.
Buenas noches, señora.
It is different than when we were earlier in the day. Peter, I should point out that most Cubans will be home this evening. There are no big fireworks here, no displays, no public celebrations. This place, the Cubans who are here are either here working with us, they are here in the kitchen, or they will be on stage. The price for this evening at the Tropicana is expensive, $250. As you know, the average Cuban makes about $30 a month. And as a result, most Cubans will not be here tonight unless they are working.
Sad, I agree. You're standing in front of an awful lot of history at the Tropicana, are you not?
Yeah, and in fact, a lot of it relating to America. As you know, Peter, great American performers once performed here. This is not only the celebration of the year 2000 here at the Tropicana, but the 60-year anniversary of the Tropicana itself. Nat King Cole performed here, Carmen Miranda, the great Josephine Baker. This is a place steeped in history that it was shared with the United States. As you know, in the 40s, 30s, and 40s, this place rocked with America. There were gambling tables just behind where we're sitting here. This is open air, which is one of the first open-air theaters in the world to also have gambling and a floor show. There are 95 dancers in the show tonight. And Peter, you'll be interested to know that despite the fact it's illegal for Americans to come to Cuba and spend money, most of the people, there are 1,000 people who will be in this room, most of them Americans who we've talked to so far tonight.
Cynthia, earlier today you were talking to Ricardo Alarcón, the president of the National Assembly in Cuba, and I wonder what he would think of a celebration, who's a staunch Fidelista. I wonder what he would think of a celebration at the Tropicana tonight, other than for the revenue.
Well, I think that's exactly what he thinks. I asked him about it, in fact, Peter, and his eyes went wide open when I said to him that it was a $250 price tag, which he said he didn't know until I told him. You know, as you know from having spent a lot of time here, though much about life here is
I know, somebody's talking to you here and
beautiful.
driving you crazy, right?
Yeah, they are. Though much of life here is, thank you, is poetically beautiful, life here for the Cubans is difficult. One of ABC's key staffer here, Mariana, was not allowed, for example, to go into the hotel where we were going to change our clothes earlier in the day. I mean, there is much about life that's difficult here.
Well, we'll be back to you.
I hope you're going to come back to us at 10 o'clock.
We are, but more to the point, I hope you give my best wishes to Mariana, who's an extraordinary woman who works for ABC in Cuba, and who has a very, very strong connection to the revolution, in that her husband is the senior most Cuban general ever to be killed in Cuban service overseas. He was killed in Africa, where the Cubans were fighting on one side of a guerrilla war some years ago. Thank you. We'll go back to Cuba at midnight and join Cynthia again at the Tropicana. Now we're going to go just across the street here in Broadway to MTV, where well, MTV needs no explaining to anybody, except at the moment they're playing and enjoying the Goo Goo Dolls.
Cause we're living in a world that we're best forgotten. Think you're a joke, nobody's gonna listen to the one smart point. I know you've been listening now. Hey,
It's too dark right now. Let's go say hi to the Goo Goo Dolls in their home state. Bobby's got his shoes off. Thank you, guys. That was awesome. Happy
ABC
New Year.
2000
Thank you.
will be back in a moment. From around the world, this is ABC 2000. Once again from Times Square in New York, Peter Jennings.
Well, we've been taking the measure of all time and the measure of the world today, asking our questions whether the 21st century will be a global century, an American one, but it has been very much of a global event today. And we know and are grateful to those of you who've dropped in or stayed with us in some cases for many hours at a time. But just in case you haven't, let's go once again to ABC's Bob Brown, who brings us the highlights from all across the globe so far.
For a change, however fearsome or dangerous or inhospitable we seem to make the world, millions of people in every time zone concentrated today on breathtaking accomplishments, past, present, and future. Witness the Eiffel Tower, planned to celebrate the French Revolution, built as a symbol of the industrial age, now dressed in 20,000 lights, looking as if it sprouted wings. Or the Parthenon of Athens, bathed in light, having been raised before what we count as the first millennium and damaged and sacked and restored through centuries of conflict. There were extraordinary moments whose origins were extraordinary cruelty. South Africa's Nelson Mandela passing a flame of reconciliation in ceremonies on Robben Island, where he had spent 18 of his 26 years in prison before becoming president of South Africa. Berlin's Brandenburg Gate, access denied by the Berlin Wall between 1961 and 1989, was lit by a huge laser show tonight. Bethlehem, the city where Jesus was born, drew fewer tourists than expected because of fears of terrorism and had a magnificent show before a crowd that was overwhelmingly Palestinian.
Inizia in questo momento.
I wish a Happy New Year to everyone in the light which shines out of Bethlehem, said Pope John Paul II, who spoke from his apartment window above St. Peter's Square. The Pope has called Y2K the Great Jubilee. And so far, although it is too early to tell, Y2K has not been the great disaster many feared would happen to governments and businesses now dependent on computer technology. There are still many turns to come before the celebrations are over, but for sheer technological size and nerve, London's billion-dollar Millennium Dome takes the prize, although the Royal Mail did fail to deliver 2,000 invitations to its opening. For those who didn't make it, as there have been for centuries, there were plenty of other sites along the Thames.
And we've been making connections today in a right way. Thanks very much, Bob.